Caught my eye.
Tom King, I was interested in, it said engage your senator and your congressman. How well are they doing? There are rather disturbing reports of becoming a bit of a party political battle, you might say, over these issues. Whereas I'd like to think in this country, under Liz Brown's leadership as well, we've got a pretty good cross-party support, very wide indeed, for these initiatives. What's the state of Congress?
First of all, during the last presidential election campaign, both candidates expressly endorsed what we were doing. And then after the election, President Obama immediately moved, I think rather powerfully, in actions in this area. And Senator McCain made a very strong speech on the floor of the Senate endorsing this effort. So it was kept, in a sense, as we think of it, nonpartisan. Since that time, a lot has been accomplished, but from a standpoint of our Congress, a key thing was the so-called New START Treaty. And it was introduced, and Senator Lugar, the ranking Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee, expressed his support for it. There was a hearing, and then it went to Senate Foreign Relations Committee. There was a hearing. Bill was one of the testifiers. The Republican testifier, so to speak, was Jim Schlesinger, who picked away at the treaty. And at the end, he was asked, well, under all the circumstances, would you vote for ratification? He said, of course it should be ratified. It then got voted out of committee, and some Republicans joined Dick Lugar to make that possible. And then it wound its way along. There was a lot of yakety-yak. In the end, it got ratified. So nothing happens without difficulty and compromise. But anyway, it happened. I think there are all sorts of problems to work with our Congress. But Sam Nunn used to tell me all the time when he was a senator and I was Secretary of State, if you want me in on the landing, include me in the takeoff. So I think as the administration works, or as we work in this country toward additional things, it's really important to start with people at the beginning and include them. And if there are going to be negotiations, have a process like the one that we had, where we had observer groups. First, I might say I was a little uneasy as Secretary of State that this is the executive's job and what are these guys going to do? But they came, they met with the Soviets, they met with our people. I was a little afraid they might undercut us. That never happened at all, never. But then when we brought the treaty back to the Senate, they knew all about it. They had been in at the takeoff. And I think it makes a huge difference. So when it comes to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty right now, if you threw it at the Senate and took a vote, you'd lose. But that's not the way to do it, and I think the administration is seeing that you got to go about it one senator at a time and build your case. And that's true with all of these things.
One of the things that I think is important, George just mentioned, and that is the Arms Control Observer Group. We had the blessings of the leadership when we formed that. Ted Stevens and I were the first co-chairs of it. We went to Geneva, where we had discussions going on, and Vienna. We probably went over a period of each year, we probably went 2 or 3 times. We'd have 10, 12, 14 senators, both parties. They aren't doing that now, and I think they really need to take another look at that. That makes an enormous difference because they understand what's happening and not just have a treaty presented to them without having a background. I think that's got to be done, as George said, on a comprehensive test ban treaty. I believe the Senate, one of its great prerogatives is the basic ratification of treaties. It basically puts the Senate in the constitutional role of helping frame and shape American foreign policy. But if treaty ratifications are as difficult as they've been in the past, I think inevitably presidents are going to move towards more executive agreements, or even avoiding executive agreements and move towards just informal agreements, which is not good for anyone. We need to continue the process of ratification, but the Senate itself, for instance, the law of the sea, enormously important to our own country, and it's been sitting there for years. At some point, executive branch will get less and less favorable to moving in that fashion with treaties, and I think that'll undermine the rule of law around the globe. So I think the Senate has to take another whole look at the way they're going about ratification. That's not to say they got to sign up for everything. That's not their role. But they need to get the process better than it is now. And the George Shultz leadership when he was Secretary of State was remarkable in that sense. He basically, I don't know how many times, I saw George more as Secretary of State than I did all the others that I served with during that time. And it wasn't because I was his favorite, it's what he did. He reached out. And that lesson...
I always thought you were my friend.
Well, except on the golf course, yeah.
Tom, I'd give you a little different cut on that. That I don't believe this Congress, in the last couple of years, has voted 2/3 on anything. And therefore, I was quite apprehensive about this treaty coming forward. And yet it passed with about 5 votes to spare. And I think
there would have been more if they were needed, I think.
There were 4 more votes that didn't vote for it because of other reasons, in my opinion.
But I think I would say that the attention and the publicity we've given this issue had a lot to do with that rather lopsided vote. That's the good news. The bad news is that the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is, the President is not willing even to bring it for vote now because he did not think he'll get to 2/3 on it. So the bad news is we still have a lot of hard work ahead of us to relate the story we're telling here to the importance of the step, and the next step being this Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is a very important one.
And the lesson there, I wasn't there when it was voted down, I'd already left the Senate, but it was voted down without preparation that George has outlined and I've outlined, and it came up, and they made a terrible mistake, those who were in favor of it, by agreeing to unanimous consent to vote on a date certain without having any certainty of the votes, and then they couldn't get out when they realized they didn't have the votes. So they would have been much better to bring it down and go back and be patient about it. Now, what you've got to do is convince senators who voted no that there have been enough changed circumstances so they can tell their constituents that they were right when they voted no, but they would also be right when they voted yes.
You don't have to change your mind.
As members of Parliament, you're well aware of that challenge.
Yeah, we need to know that over here as well.
But,
Yes, sir.
but the evidence has come in. It is
That's right.
a different picture.
That's right.